Hey everyone, welcome to our DevOps office hours. It's November 23rd, 2022. My name's Eric Osterman and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse is a DevOps accelerator. We help companies conquer AWS using our proven blueprints. If you're starting from scratch or just not happy with the state of your infrastructure today, then you should probably check out what we have. Go to cloudposse.com/quiz to book a session with me directly, and I'll show you what the future of your infrastructure could look like. For those of you new to the call, the format's very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. If you're curious about Cloud Posse or any of our open source tools or modules, this is a great place to ask. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Our call today is recorded. We'll automatically post a recording of this session to our YouTube channel. So if you enjoy the content and want to support what we do over here, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. It helps us out a great deal. Just head over to youtube.com/cloudposse. Again, that's youtube.com/cloudposse to subscribe. So with that said, let's jump into this week's announcements. So the first one was Calhoun. Matt's doing some pretty hardcore GitHub Actions programming lately. And he mentioned that it isn't possible to use the GitHub CLI to simulate specific webhook events in your local development environment without relying on complex port forwarding or third-party tools. So Matt, are you on the call?
Yeah. So just to be clear, it's actually not simulating them. It's actually,
Really?
It will actually allow you to tap into and listen to actual events from a particular repo or a particular org and pass those to a local URL that you run your app on locally. So you no longer have to do like crazy, crazy things to get events in. If you're writing a local, a local web app, you can just spin this, and then it essentially using the CLI, it listens for all those events and then tunnels the events through the CLI and then like re-forwards them to the local URL that you specify, which I think is really cool for development purposes.
Okay, yeah, that is cool. That's a little bit. I guess that in some ways that's better than what I thought, except for one thing. I mean, you still have to then go ahead and simulate all those events in GitHub itself. For example, pushing commits up, opening PRs, closing PRs, etc.
Although, being the skeptic here, if you want to do that in the local app that you're writing, capture all of those events, like do it once, capture them all, and then you can use mocked events to do all those things.
Yeah.
But you can, in this case, you can actually get them for your specific repo that you're working on or for your specific org, etc., without having to without having to try to like mock those yourself. And you don't, if you're deploying this to some sort of GitHub app that like runs in Lambda or something like that, like you don't have to set up like a second place for it to send events and then go through all the hassle of doing all that. You can just, work locally with this turned on, listen to all the events, and then, when you're ready, you push it up, and then your production version just works as expected, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I dig it.
Yeah.
So you've already been using this together with Act?
Yeah.
And actually, how does that work with Act? So, I mean, it sounded easy enough, great for webhooks, but Act has a way to receive webhooks?
No, like I've been using it for developing like something that I run locally. So like the action is the action, but then like this is for developing like GitHub apps that would receive webhooks.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see.
Yeah. Two different
problem space
use case scenarios or whatever. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Anyone have any questions on this before we move on? All right. The next one is an enhancement. So GitHub environments are an effective way if you're using open source projects If you're using open source projects or you have a GitHub enterprise organization, you can leverage environment protection rules. Basically, who is allowed to confirm or reject a deployment to a given environment? Well, one of the downsides when you're on GitHub and using GitHub for CD is the UI leaves a lot to be desired. It's difficult to kind of know what deployments are pending everywhere. And in lieu of GitHub solving that problem, I guess they first implemented this because what most people want is probably to be notified via Slack or whatever their communication platform is, or some other third-party dashboard that they built in-house, that there's a deployment pending. So with this change, with this enhancement, there's now a report of a waiting state when an environment is awaiting a deployment. So this is a great way to integrate it with any internal dashboards that you might have, like Backstage or something. All right. Next announcement is, so last week, I believe we posted an article on how Spotify uses Terraform at scale. This is now how Cloudflare uses it. So it's kind of interesting if they were in cahoots and posted around the same time. The thing that stands out here is actually for a company the size of Cloudflare to be depending on Atlantis was a real shocker to us, because Atlantis is a wonderful tool. Don't get us wrong on that, but it's a pretty basic tool when it comes to managing deployments with Terraform. And I wonder how they're doing that particular area at scale with using that. And you can see how they're using, I guess, with Bitbucket, and then they can see the progress of the pull request here with the comments and so forth. So standard stuff. I guess if you're relying strictly on your project management system or the way you do your pull request, maybe it's manageable, but you're not going to be able to do like cross project dependencies very easily, managing something like that or policies with it. All right. Next announcement, small one. It was trending on Reddit this week. Is tftree, a little small utility in Go. You can just run it in the local directory and it'll show you kind of the hierarchy of modules in use within a given Terraform project. Honestly, it's just something that should be in the Terraform core, or if Matt, with the new plugin interface with the Terraform CLI, could you add an extension to it or something to implement functionality like this, or not yet?
Not yet. They still don't give you access to all of the things.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of cool though. You can just add extensions to Terraform, much like kubectl and Helm support. Adding extensions, Terraform needs the same thing. And then we could just move Atmos into Terraform or make that an alternative reality.
Just quickly before you move on, I forgot to post it before, but I also just saw a couple of weeks ago that Slack also posted a how we use Terraform at Slack.
I think I said Spotify. I meant to say Slack. That was
okay.
Posted. Yeah, we talked about that one last week. It was Slack. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for clearing that up.
I didn't know if there was also a Spotify one. I thought maybe that was there too. I was like, wow, everyone's writing about it.
Yeah. This was. Oh, so this one was posted in October 25th. Cool. Next announcement is a project. It's been around apparently for a while. It just got my attention. Called Kubeshark, and it is like Wireshark but for Kubernetes. So what's cool about this is you can understand the actual traffic flows within Kubernetes to your services without relying on a service mesh. Obviously, it is a feature of many of the service meshes there, but this is just pure Kubernetes. And it does bring into question, well, what happens if you are using a mesh? Is it going to be opaque, especially since everything's TLS? I'm guessing mileage will vary. And has anybody already been using Kubeshare? All right. So Vlad was awesome and shared everything cool and happening. Oh, you can't see this window. Let me share. Well, I'm just gonna, what am I gonna do? I'm just gonna open them separately. Everything cool and happening in AWS, of which one of them was this one here. A couple other people also posted. This is awesome news. So finally, your AWS root accounts can have multiple multi-factor devices. So this issue, if you want to use physical MFA devices, but have a distributed team, possibly across the US or continents and so forth, you can have that continuity by adding multiple MFA devices. Now, obviously, you should never be using that account, but as a fail-safe, it makes me feel warm and fuzzy by knowing that that ability is there. Previously, the only possibility was what we were doing is basically you share a root user in something like 1Password and have a .p, and then that way people can you can share that with multiple stakeholders. So Linda, can you make a note? I need to update the design decision for root account MFA in light of this new finding.
Okay.
Thanks. All right. The next, let's see here. So,
hey Eric, before you move on, could you just mute everyone except for yourself? I think we have someone that's got some background noise going on.
Yep,
Thanks.
I'll do that. Good call. All right. Yeah, so feel free to unmute yourself if you want to participate. We just want to try and make it quiet for everyone. The next announcement was this one here. Vlad might need your insights on this. What's this deal with Finch? I haven't heard of it. Open source client for container development.
So keep in mind, this is new. I haven't had time to try it. It's been released yesterday. But remember how everybody's like, oh my God, Docker desktop, Rancher desktop, all that. Well, this is Finch. It seems to be a wrapper for Lima NerdCTL container build kit. It's basically a pretty easy to install, super streamlined CLI. It's macOS only right now. That allows you to build, run, and test containers.
Nice.
It seems to be really nice and easy to use. I haven't had the time to test it, and it's super early, but I like AWS kind of focusing on the developer experience and releasing this tool that, again, is just, not just because I don't want to diminish the work that they're doing, but it's wrapping and it's collaborating with the open source community to add some developer experience. So I really like this idea.
Just another nail in the coffin. Poor Docker, poor Mirantis.
I wouldn't say so. Like the Docker desktop plan has evolved a lot. Like I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, they launched, I don't know what they call it. It's basically a deep dive. You can see what's into an image, like the files that were changed, the commands that were used, basically a lighter version of Dive. And Docker still does like awesome Kubernetes and local storage and mapping and things. Like
it's got a long lead on that.
There's a lot of value there.
Yeah. So this is really suitable. Like if your organization is over the $10 million mark and doesn't want to pay for Docker licenses, and you haven't yet selected one of the other alternatives. I think Rancher has Rancher Desktop, and there's a couple others at least. This is in that category of Docker alternatives for local development. Okay. The next announcement was, let's see here, 5 terabyte AMIs. Wow. From the previous of 1 terabyte. I didn't even know you could do 1 terabyte AMI. So that's cool. Guess this is for data science use cases or something.
Yeah, you basically embed the data set in your AMI so you can
Yeah.
run various different models against it, and they're huge.
Yeah. I wonder when it's going to be at petabyte scale. The next announcement here was application load balancers.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say we can't see your slide that has the thing on it anymore because you're sharing your I think you're not sharing that. The one that actually has the
Oh, this.
agenda. Oh yeah,
Well,
there you go.
actually,
Yeah.
I ran off. I ran
Sorry.
into
I
too
see.
many more. And
I thought
then,
you were pointing at that.
Oh
Sorry,
yeah.
brother.
And then so this is really just a Slack thread in the office hours channel
Got
that
it.
I posted. So I'm just going off of that now. Thanks, Vlad, by the way. That was really nice. You saved me some time today to dig up what has happened that's interesting. I mean, it's just phenomenal when you look at the AWS news every week, and it's like 45, 50 announcements. I mean, most of them are only interesting to if it solves one specific problem. Just how many things that they are churning out or knocking out every single week is amazing.
I knew you were gonna ask what announcements I found interesting, and rather than bumbling my way through it and searching for links, I spent 10 minutes putting them up. Plus, like I do this already for my clients. Because look at this announcement. Like it's not at all clear. Like, what does this mean in English? Please explain it to me. I don't understand. And it's not easy to understand what AWS announcements are actually relevant and what they do. Like this specifically now allows folks to do per availability zone load balancers, which is a really big deal in case one AZ gets degraded, as we've seen over the last couple outages, where there were AZs that had issues. If you have a multi-AZ load balancer with target groups that have targets in multiple AZs, the ALB is smart enough, will figure out that there's a problem in an AZ, will stop routing to that, but it's not very fast, and it's not something that you could easily force. Like if you want to test it or if you want to fail yourself, like an AZ is kind of failing, but not really, and we're just gonna to block it so we don't send traffic there anymore because it's a bit weird. This now offers that possibility, and it's awesome for folks that need like high reliability.
Makes sense. I wonder if that's almost something could you imagine this being a setting one would always want to enable if working in the Kubernetes context, and then enabling kind of the scheduler to increase backend capacity by AZ, and then Kubernetes handles this redistribution of load automatically and conveniently.
It depends a lot on the architecture. For example, if you're doing a Kubernetes cluster per AZ, which a lot of folks are forced to do because they're doing cell-based architectures or they have very intense reliability requirements and stuff like that, this is a godsend. It really depends a lot on how you're architecting your applications, but it's something that has been missing and was, from what I've seen, requested a lot. So I was excited to see this launch.
Interesting. I haven't heard that, running a cluster per AZ as opposed to a node group per AZ. That's interesting. The next announcement, GA.
Actually, while we're on that, just really quick, I think if you look, one of the other links I posted in our internal one was about the AWS fault isolation boundaries. In there, and they just updated that paper with a bunch of things, and I recently read it, and they do a really good job of telling you like where all the places where your application could possibly break if you're relying on their on their infrastructure. So that's basically what this is. So it's telling, like they tell you about all their resilience patterns and basically how you need to architect your app to make sure that you don't break things, based on some assumptions that you think are there and they aren't. So like you were just saying, like the AZ cluster per AZ is a good one because the cluster controller in a particular availability zone could go down, and then your node, even though you have nodes that are in another AZ, they might not know what to do because the cluster controller is like screwed up.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so that was one of the things, but it's an interesting paper. So anyone that wants to take a read of it, read it.
Yeah, I did forget to, I was meaning to add that to this here and I forgot to. Oops.
It's not that important.
Yeah, no, but I also use this for other purposes.
Yeah.
So journaling that.
No, I was joking that you made the font like 85
Oh.
points. I was saying it wasn't that important.
All right, so this one here, AppSync GraphQL API support JavaScript resolvers.
Yeah.
Can
This is
somebody
awesome.
highlight this one?
Before you could only do VTL resolvers, which a lot of folks hate with intense passion because it's not the easiest thing to write, to debug. It's super performant, but not the easiest thing. And now they added the ability to, hey, just use JavaScript, which is a lot friendlier. It's a huge deal for AppSync people. This and Federation were like, in my view, the things that pushed AppSync over the hump. Like now it's a service that has wide appeal. Like before you could do Federation, it was, you had to do a bunch of voodoo, not great. You had to, you were losing a lot of GraphQL advantages. So it wasn't great. They added Federation, or they're about to add it. There's a public, no, I think they added it. There's a public GitHub issue you can look at either way. And then they made resolvers much easier with JavaScript. I mean, for super easy resolvers, still do VTL, but for complex ones, JavaScript is going to be so much easier. And it makes AppSync be such a more approachable service. Like this is a really big deal.
Cool. Anything else to add to that, anyone?
The only thing I would say is just really quickly understanding if you haven't really used the graph AppSync that much, the way that it works is like you can like get data directly from multiple AWS services, and then these resolvers are the things that help you like map the data in and out for parameters and for shaping the data results and all of those kind of things. And I can tell you, having done some complex ones in VTL in the past, that it was a nightmare, and I'm super excited about this. So this is really so much better.
Cool. And the next announcement that we had here was also AppSync related. Confused deputy issue.
Yeah, so basically the Datadog researchers figure out a way to get access to resources in other folks' AWS accounts, which is really bad. But if you scroll a tiny bit and look at the timeline, as always, AWS was super responsive. And if you click on the coordinated disclosure with AWS link, right to the left of your pointer right now. No, November 21st, 2022, coordinated disclosure, click on coordinated disclosure. We get the AWS official security bulletin, which has, unlike Azure, the really good line of analysis of logs going back to the launch of the service have been concluded, and we have conclusively determined that the only activity associated with the issue was between accounts owned by the researcher. No other customer accounts were impaired. Like, this is a proper response to a security issue. Unlike others, and I'll leave it at that because I'm trying to be nice.
Well,
This
yeah,
is actually why they need to have AMIs with 5 terabytes, so they could have loaded up all this log data and done the analysis for themselves.
except for it was probably 5.
Way longer. Yeah, I'm saying per AMI.
Yeah. But yeah, it is always nice to make these announcements when you can conclusively say that this hasn't happened, and that they had this much data available to be able to look back with a sufficient detail and headers and everything else to look back and do that. That's cool. It'd be interesting to learn more about how they did that.
So yeah, extrapolating that means that somewhere in AWS there is a log of every time anyone ever assumed a role from somewhere. Right?
Wow.
That's pretty scary.
In addition to your logs of having that, your cloud, basically,
Yeah.
AWS has their own IAM level CloudTrail logs, I guess. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
for
not
like
only for appsing, like
like across the entire service.
other, like they had a security issue where they had the same line, and it's something that's admirable.
Yeah. All right, got a couple more here. AWS Lambda add support for Node.js 18. Context, Matt, Vlad.
That's just the
Lots of
latest.
people want Node.js 18.
Yeah, it's the latest LTS version of that.
How long has it been out, and how long did it take them?
A while.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
It's
It also
not
took the
a trivial migration because they also changed. You were right on the blog post. They changed the AWS SDK that's baked into the runtime from version 2 to version 3, and there are a bunch of changes. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, for people that want faster version of this, you can always build your own custom runtime, obviously, that has whatever version of Node you want in it. This is just you can now just target like Node, Node 18, as the execution platform, and you don't need a custom AMI or whatever, not AMI, a custom what's it called? Image layer that has your own stuff in it.
Oh, I realize there's been quite a lot of chatter in the Zoom chat. I'll get to those right after the last 2 announcements here for AWS. This has been AWS heavy announcements. Let's see here. Simplify cross-account access for your AWS services with AWS step functions. So AWS step functions now support cross-account for over 220 services. Interesting. So easier to build Rube Goldberg apparatuses in a native AWS way to orchestrate complex processes across accounts. Makes sense.
We should use step functions to deploy Terraform.
Yeah,
So much
possibly.
easier.
Or, but what I have heard is, who is it? Somebody was mentioning using lambdas at a minimum, but step functions would be lambdas too, but I guess step functions with lambdas possibly to do cross-account IAM role provisioning, or like basically simplifying management of delegated IAM roles in other accounts.
Or Atlantis for each apply or plan invoking a step function that creates a new container in Fargate. So you can do massively parallel applies and not be limited by that. Like that would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that on the horizon?
I mean, you could do that before this announcement, and you could do cross-account with step function callbacks and stuff. This just makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah. And last one here is the AWS SAM CLI and HashiCorp Terraform.
Another title that tells folks absolutely nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So remember how Anton has the serverless.tf Terraform modules, including one
Yeah.
for Lambda, where building the Lambda code is an absolute, excuse my language, clusterfuck.
Yeah.
And there's an option for a Docker container or a Python script. Well, you can now offload that step to SAM, which is AWS managed CLI to build and develop serverless things, and they have native support for Terraform. And Anton's module Terraform AWS Lambda had the day zero support for this. They coordinated. So now there's a way more reliable way to package your Lambdas if you're using Terraform. And if you're using Terraform, you can now use the SAM CLI when you develop, which is for things like getting the logs on your local machine, faster updates to function, and things like that.
And also local testing. I think that's the biggest one. Like you can, so it actually scans the Terraform code and will launch the Lambda for you locally so that you can run and test it locally before actually pushing it up to the cloud. So, dev cycle times are obviously greatly reduced when you can do that.
But is it
really awesome? But I want to add that this is just like a first step in SAM's integration with Terraform. Like it's literally the first release they did. And if you have thoughts on this or want to see specific things, the SAM team is taking feedback on their GitHub repository. So make your voices heard. But it's an awesome first release.
Is it add SAM? No, which
go back to the README and search for SAM.
Yeah, okay, I'll try again.
It's not fully documented yet, but
SAM
enter. Yes, this is how to use SAM.
Is it actually converting it to Terraform, or is it still using CloudFormation? Because SAM, when I've used it before, has always been CloudFormation.
It's not converting anything to CloudFormation. SAM can now integrate with Terraform through hooks and stuff. Like no weird Terraform to CloudFormation stuff. Folks were vehemently against that when the SAM team asked for, hey, we're considering integrated with Terraform. How would you like to see this done?
Because I actually have a Lambda function that's running using Bref and with PHP Symfony 6. And this is the one piece, is the fact that I had the Lambda function as SAM, but I was working and having to create an entire provider to be able to get it to deploy. This is interesting. I'll have to take a look at that.
So what's still unclear to me, or like what I've not liked about any of this is the solutions I've seen that work with Terraform and Lambda have Terraform doing CI things and CD things related to Docker, like building a Docker image or running using local exec and so forth, which to me is the anti-pattern. Like those artifacts should exist, and then you use Terraform.
So SAM will build the artifact for you.
SAM is a Amazon managed resource.
SAM is a CLI that is their like the canonical way to build and test Lambdas.
Yeah.
In AWS. So that's what it will actually do.
But it's not
serverless.io for like a wrapper to create Lambdas and other serverless functions. So
yeah, well,
SAM is like serverless.io specifically for AWS.
And I get all of that. And that's what it's meant to me. SAM, serverless application framework by Amazon for this. But it still doesn't get to the root of my problem, is that Terraform should run by calling Terraform something, and I shouldn't need to install a bunch of binaries, have pads set up, have Node.js installed, have Python installed, or have all those things. But in this case, you have to have the SAM CLI installed, it sounds like, in order to run it, which is the same as needing to have Python installed in order to run it.
Sort of. It depends what you're looking at. I mean, you're concentrating on one aspect of it. I'm like, what I would concentrate on this would be mostly look at that line right there that says SAM invoke local invoke. So what that's actually doing is like it's executing it's executing a Lambda you defined in Terraform locally on your machine. So you can actually test it without even having to like push this up to the cloud. Like it builds it dynamically, spins it up, sends an event to it, and you can actually see like the output of that Lambda right there on your local machine. I think that's like awesome.
That's
You can
what they're
also
optimizing
you
for.
can also do it on cloud if you want. Like it can do it, and the logs will get streamed to you. It will spin up like a temporary Lambda and like stream the logs to your back to your desktop for you, so you can see them there. That's great there. But then also SAM has always had a thing called SAM deploy, right?
Mhm.
So you can SAM deploy this, and it will actually deploy the Terraform code for you. Instead, where before it used to package all of this stuff up as a CloudFormation stack, it would push the CloudFormation stack and then kick it off. Now, instead of that, it will actually call the underlying Terraform module for you to apply that. So while this isn't necessarily like, there isn't a canonical Terraform way to deploy Lambda functions, right? We all have hacked something together where we build an artifact maybe, and then we go and fetch that artifact from somewhere, and then we deploy it, or we do use like the hack that was in this module before that, or a number of different ways. And I think SAM actually gives you like a real way to do that now. So like, I don't know. I personally think it's a great solution. I mean, and it's we've all used serverless framework as well, right? Where you'll like say serverless deploy, and then that happens, and then none of your stuff is in Terraform. So this actually lets you leave it in Terraform, but actually still just deploy it a different way than you would have normally deployed it.
Yeah. It's going to take me a while to accept change my worldview on this one, I guess. I see how it improves the developer experience. Go on, Max.
I can get your point that it falls out of our usual way we work. Like you don't see this in Spacelift, you don't see Drift for this, but think of it as like this is coming from different sides. You're using Terraform to set up like a foundational infrastructure and like a whole skeleton of the organization, and SAM is more focused on developer experience and for individual teams. So you might be using Terraform, like you might be setting up those skeleton and then just set up a SAM template for individual teams, and then they will just use some GitHub action to invoke that just to quickly iterate on their applications. Something like this. It's just going from different sides, and I saw how it works together sometimes. Like there is really use cases where there is a foundation team working on like a organization skeleton, and then individual teams using some local fuzzy things to quickly iterate and push. And they even perhaps for production or for staging, they might use your skeleton version of Lambda, your vision to deploy Lambda. But for the local development, for quick iteration, they still want to use some fuzzy things that work, they spin really quickly, and they can experiment really quickly without going into all of the dependencies.
That makes sense to me. Improving the developer experience, because the developer experience, just calling the Terraform and building the Lambdas and all that wasn't superb. So like you said, the ability to run the Lambdas locally, the ability then to, I guess, so teams can still provide, you can provide your Terraform modules or templates to this that it'll use as part of it. Okay, makes sense.
And I would challenge you back and tell you, like, you don't seem to be upset that you're deploying other infrastructure components with like Helm or Helm chart or something like that. This is.
But I don't want the Helm chart calling Terraform. I don't want the Terraform calling the Helm chart to deploy a service in Kubernetes that deploys Terraform to deploy this IAM role. That's kind of like the too many context switches there. And this is kind of like, we have this Terraform and then we have this CLI. I want, like, if I'm using Terraform, I want our Terraform CI and I want our Terraform CD to do the Terraform CI and the Terraform CD. I don't want the SAM CLI trying to do Terraform things. Because then it breaks all this tooling, all this stuff we've done to do Terraform the right way won't work with it. Eventually the tools will catch up, but like this is a solution that's incompatible with, well, okay. It sounds like I don't see how this would work right now with Terraform Cloud, but somebody can, correct me if I'm wrong.
On the other hand, considering Lambda's way to deploy code, it's like you could use SAM to make a zip, upload it to S3, and then reference that in your Terraform code. But it's not necessarily better than calling SAM CLI from Terraform, in my view.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue that in the end, the outcome to the developer is probably going to be more intuitive by doing it this way. It's just this, yeah. That I'm struggling with.
You're just looking at this from a very different level. And if an organization has a full Cloud Posse stack with the Lambda module and like a Lambda Hello World example, or like a Lambda cookie cutter to copy, I bet they would not go to SAM to generate their Lambda again from scratch. This is for newcomers into Lambdas, I think, because it makes it easier to start on serverless, and for someone who's not sure what is their way to work, this is really fast and easy to start.
So somebody else brought up serverless. Alex Atkinson brought up serverless, and I've said so many times on office hours, I have no problem with it. I think you should use a framework to do Lambdas. You should use a framework to do serverless. I guess, but I somehow this is rubbing me the wrong way because it is.
So you're okay with the magic of it creating cloud formation and doing that for you, but
I
not
guess so. I was
Terraform,
okay with that.
Which doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, you know why? Because CloudFormation handles the hard things of CD. It handles the hard things of rollbacks. And those hard things are the things teams fail at when they do Terraform. And that's why we have these other tools to try and do it. And I feel like this is a step in the right direction in improving the developer experience. It's a step in the right direction, possibly, of saying that we're reusing Terraform code and the team can establish patterns and best practices for it. But that step is in a direction which is orthogonal to being able to use any of these other techniques that we've developed to manage continuous delivery, drift detection, and so forth of Terraform. From my my armchair perspective of this today.
So I'll throw one other perspective out there just really quickly, is that I think you could use SAM for the local development experience, as well as using it in your pipeline, because SAM supports just building artifacts and not doing the deploy.
Okay.
So you could actually do
I'll see
SAM
that.
build and SAM package, which would then
build
your image, build your, build your zip file, whatever you need for you. And then you could deploy it using the same way. I don't think you'd be forced to do it the way we were talking about, but it does do that if you wanted to do that.
Changing hearts and minds every day, man. All right. That was a great one. Let's see here. We finished those. Let's jump into the Zoom chat. There was a bunch of conversations there. Alex Atkinson mentioning Tailscale has some local host GitHub actions, which are cool. So is this idea that you can deploy Tailscale as part of your workflow and then be able to exec basically into the running container of some step? Oh, I guess he's not able to unmute maybe. Anyways, that's interesting. I'll take a look at that one. GitHub Actions workflow authorization. Oh, so is this basically,
is-
this is a alternative or workaround for doing authorization without relying on,
It's poor man's approvals or
Yeah,
whatever you want to call
yeah,
it.
okay. Yeah, no, that's cool. That's a nice, simple write-up on how to do that. Because, yeah, it's a big jump to go to GitHub Enterprise in terms of cost.
Yeah, don't go to GitHub Enterprise.
I disagree. I mean, I love personally GitHub Enterprise. If money's no object, definitely do GitHub Enterprise.
Oh, that depends entirely who you are.
The things that the fewer hoops you have to jump through. For example, shared workflows, private shared workflows, private GitHub actions without hoops. The UX experience of the approval steps is nice and convenient. The audit action abilities of it are nice.
Yeah, I'll give it all that. If you have a multi-team or any kind of workflow you need an approval step and that accountability, like it's not really an option. The second you're running a business that has compliance stuff, like your OpEx is 10xing. So
Yeah. So it is extremely expensive to go with that. The usual. Oops. Yeah, 425% price increase to go to GitHub Enterprise.
oh, sweet hell.
Yeah, it really hurts. Or just open source everything you do, and then you don't have to worry about it. All right. Back to Zoom here. Let's see here. I'm just skimming through if there's something that's talking point worthy. All right. Let's jump into some.
Can I give one quick perspective about I know this was on the last topic, but I see Alex's comment where he said, like, I still don't like it. Sick Sam. Like here, just use serverless, leave TF for the Terraform for the long resource type stuff.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing I would just argue just real quickly about that would be the biggest friction for me for serverless always becomes in the supporting infrastructure for your applications. So like, how do you create the the SQS the DynamoDB, the S3 bucket that you need? When you start doing that in in serverless, then that rubs me the wrong way, because then you're now creating it with CloudFormation under the hood. But when you create it in in Terraform and then want to use it in the serverless framework, now you have to figure out some way to like either store it in somewhere you can look it up, or pass that data environment variables, or do something else. So I think the SAM one gives you better interoperability with other infrastructure you've provided or provisioned using
Yeah, the
Terraform.
bridge I use there is like, I love laying out the long life resources in Terraform, and then I can stick everything into a parameter store.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's a good bridge.
yeah. It's a bridge. We'll agree on that one. So sorry, that's it. I just wanted to make sure we commented on
I
that
also
part of
saw
it.
templating serverless YAMLs for environments that also worked. But yeah, I agree, that's a pain.
Another massive thumbs down for serverless framework from me too. I'm not gonna go into my rant again, but yeah, no.
What is the industry doing as a whole, do you guys see, in terms of frameworks for serverless programming? Is the serverless framework itself still doing really well? Is more and more attention going towards SAM for people on AWS? Is SAM specific still to AWS, or has SAM expanded to others?
I can share what I'm seeing with my customers. So serverless framework has, give me a second, I'm trying to use thoughtful language. Serverless framework hasn't fixed a lot of problems or evolved significantly since 2016, which is in it, and it was overtaken by other tools. Serverless framework still relies on plugins. Those plugins were badly maintained. To their credit, they started the whole program to fund vital plugins and stuff. It's still going terrible. And you end up writing CloudFormation, but in serverless framework for pretty much everything. It's a bad experience. But, and this is an important disclaimer, I work with a certain type of company. I work with serious companies that want to invest in reliability and want to be high performing. So I have a very specific point of view. Your experience might be different. But I saw a lot of folks give up specifically on serverless framework because of that.
Yeah, it's got a lot of, it's got all the
to-
same software supply chain issues as NPM or, you know, the Python package library. Like the second you have third parties involved in your software supply chain, you know, the risks are rough for a lot of companies. If you're in banking, medical, any of this, you've got to do
It's
everything
not- I wouldn't even call it supply chain. Like there are vital plugins for serverless framework that were barely maintained. Anyway,
Yeah, and it's
Sam-
just like a guy who does it in his spare time.
yeah, and if you look at it, it's the worst possible JavaScript code.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get into that. It was an awesome community. They really pushed the serverless user experience further, and I thank them for that. But they dropped the ball. Totally opposed to that, SAM launched. It was super boring, and a couple of years ago, AWS really started to focus on that. And yes, Eric, as far as I know, it's still AWS only. But SAM in the last 2 to 3 years improved massively. And I've seen what I do with customers is either CloudFormation with or without SAM, and serverless.tf, which used to be with the Docker Builder. Now we're moving to SAM because, again, SAM keeps getting attention from AWS, and they really,
The resources.
they seem to be really focused on thoughtfully improving. Like, look at the Terraform integration. Folks were like, hey, we want Terraform integration. Hey, we want Terraform integration. They collected feedback. They discussed with a bunch of folks. They listened to the community to what they wanted. And that gives me a lot of hope. So, yeah.
And
That's
on AWS specifically, the other thing you can't forget that a lot of people are using is Amplify right now, which is kind of doing a lot of that under the hood for you as well. It's not exactly the same thing, but Amplify is focused on all the tools that focus on the DevX, not DevX, the Dev UX, and then make it easy to add all these things. I think are doing pretty well in these in the
Don't do
AWS
Amplify.
framework.
I'm gonna disagree with that. Don't do Amplify. It's still a chaotic experience, and I'll leave it at that.
I wasn't making a recommendation. I was just saying I was answering what other people are using. Like Amplify has definitely picked up users, number of users. If you see how popular it is, it's the curve is going up right now. So hopefully they do some of the same thing.
Measured by Hello World tutorials.
No,
I don't want to be mean, but there's a difference between what
repository
we
stars.
talked about and all the getting started guides and what people are actually doing in production and what people are successfully doing in production. But that's a whole nother topic. And we
I
think
thought you were bullish on it, though. I thought you were for Amplify.
Amplify hosting, not Amplify.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay. I agree.
They're trying to make Amplify better. I'll give them that. There's still a lot of things I don't like. The drop off is very steep. Like when you reach into Amplify's limits, getting off it is horrible. They've been trying to fix that with making the libraries more dedicated, more clear drop off points and options for breaking the glass and things, but it's not a good experience. Like, yeah, use it for a hackathon, use it to build a proof of concept for that. It's absolutely awesome. All the thumbs up, all the emojis, party emoji, party parrot, whatever. For anything else, it's a very, very, very sharp knife. And I've seen a lot of teams fail to adopt that and then have enormous pain migrating off it.
All right. Just wanted to get to one thing. I'm not sure if we really have too much to add to it. It was a question posted in the office hours Slack by Jonathan related to an announcement that Karpenter, which is the controller for managing nodes in Kubernetes outside of autoscale groups, basically directly, now supports the graceful instant termination handling.
Sorry, I think if you're showing it, we
No,
just.
I'm
blind
trying to
whiteboard
dig it
screen.
up at the same time.
There we go.
There we
It
go.
looked like you were pointing to things inside of the article, and I was like, all we see is a blank white screen.
I'm notorious for that too. So, yeah. So let's see. Yeah. So native spot termination handling. This is an alternative to the AWS node termination handler, which was the original way to do this that we've been supporting for some time. Now you don't need to deploy this additional controller. You can upgrade to 0.19 of Karpenter, and it'll handle it for you, presumably behind some feature flags. Has anyone already
faster, which is nice. Like it's not a massive groundbreaking feature, but it's really, really helpful. So if you're doing the daemon set thingy with no termination handler, that basically asks every, I don't know how many seconds, hey, am I gonna get killed in 2 minutes? Hey, am I gonna get killed in 2 minutes? And when the answer to that is yes, just marks the node as not ready and tries to evict it, which is great. But then the node finally gets terminated. The cloud controller finally figures that out. The cluster autoscaler finally figures that out and launches a new node to replace it. Like, you're losing a bunch of time there.
Yeah.
By getting this feature natively in Karpenter, what happens is Karpenter itself gets notified through an SQSQ of, hey, we're going to terminate this instance. So Karpenter can, at the same time, start draining the instance while also bringing up a replacement for the instance that is about to be terminated. So this adds a lot more responsivity to the cluster, which I like.
Is it still that 2-minute window though? Because that's really aggressive.
As far as I know, yeah, that's the spot timeout. Did they change it?
No. The only reason why I say it, so one of the things that Spot.io, Blue Ocean controller does, which is not by Amazon, which kind of pioneered in this area, is they used AI and just general market intelligence to better predict or anticipate when there would be what is the technical term? I don't know, but basically the scale down event where they would
preemption.
Preemption, thank you, exactly. So they would preempt preemptions based using some intelligence. Obviously, that could be wrong, but it's better to be wrong and give yourself more ample time than have disruptions. So if it could anticipate this with some better forecasting, so that you don't have to worry about it. Because 2 minutes, okay, we all agree that should be possible, but sometimes you might have 10, like some customers running Rails apps have maybe 10 gig base images that need to be downloaded here on new nodes. And mind you, those nodes are coming up with all kinds of other containers on a file system with no Docker cache, and downloading 100 gigs of Docker images takes often more than 2 minutes.
Well, you can now bake those images because you can do 5 terabyte AMI.
So there you have it. We figured it out. It wasn't for data science. It was for running Kubernetes clusters. with spot instances, that's why you have now 5 terabyte AMIs.
That would actually be interesting if your CI pipeline actually built your Docker cache and then pushed AMIs.
Yeah.
For the record, like I wasn't joking. I
Yeah.
do this with a bunch of customers. Like we have latency sensitive workloads and big chunky images, and we either cache full images or we cache the layers that we know change rarely or are super big, and it adds a big improvement.
That is, oh, I have a question. We're over time, but I do have a question if anybody has the quick answer for it. When you're running self-hosted GitHub action runners, doing CLI, pulling down a lot of Docker images, it is a game of Russian roulette, whether or not you're landing on a node that already has those cache layers. And Docker doesn't support working with shared layer caches on EFS, and pulling and using the GitHub action to cache images on GitHub is obviously going to be pushing up 10 gigs, downloading 10 gigs. That sucks. How can we use EFS to speed up Docker GitHub actions on like Kubernetes in AWS?
Don't use EFS, use S3. So you can use, I posted about this in the Slack a while ago, but you can now, only if you're building a Docker image, you can cache stuff to S3. But yeah, also changing the AMI that is used for how you're building for the self-hosted GitHub Actions runners is helpful. If you download a bunch of images, if you're actually building images, yeah, caching to S3. Let me find the link because I know I posted that sometime recently. And yeah, I just offloaded to Depot. Sorry, they stress about all this and it's nice. Oh, I found it.
Depot. That's that third-party managed GitHub actions, right? Yeah.
Yep. I pasted the link in the Zoom chat and in office hours. Oh, which doesn't give a pretty unfurl, but sorry. It takes you to a tweet to a tweet of mine that links to this. Like it's experimental, but you can now use S3 as a cache until ECR actually gets native support for this. And especially if you're building big images with self-hosted runners, it's quite a big improvement. I think it was, what was it? Hold on. Let me. So in the blog post there, you're building the Carbon with and without the cache, which is the OSS pretty terminal screenshot thingy. And the build time went down from 106 seconds to just 11 seconds with the S3 caching. And I can confirm, like,
Okay.
It wildly depends on the images, but until ECR gets native support for cache manifests, S3 caching is a really, really good temporary workaround.
Great. Well, this is exactly why I wanted to ask it for an answer like this. So thank you, Vlad. And thank you, everyone, for all the amazing conversation today. I'm going to wrap up office hours here, be mindful of everyone's schedule. So thank you so much for participating today. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, go to youtube.com/cloudposse and subscribe. Today's session is going to be uploaded there. You can share it with your team if you found anything useful. Additionally, if you'd like to connect with me, go to linkedin.com/in/Osterman. I love to connect with our community, or subscribe to our podcast, which is our syndicated version of office hours at podcast.cloudposse.com. We have a very active Slack community. Go to slack.cloudposse.com and participate. And with that said, see you all next week. Have a great Turkey Day if you're in the US and celebrating. Otherwise, yeah, enjoy your weekend. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.